9 Lives of Leo Roberts, a series of interconnected short stories written and narrated by Robert Fairhead from the Tall and True writer's website. 2. A Fast Car, Part 3. Bernie sat by himself on the far side of the emergency department waiting room. Elsie and Rita were sitting together near the doors to the operating theatres. Elsie was sobbing, and Bernie wanted to console her, but he couldn't face Rita's wrath again. "It's all your fault, Bernie," she shouted at him, heads turning to watch them in the waiting room. "You towed Leo's car to the quarry. You gave him tools. You helped him build a fast car. You should have told us he was racing cars at the quarry." "Rita, please," Elsie said between sobs. But Bernie didn't defend himself. He turned, walked away, and slumped onto a chair. Memories surfaced of the last time he'd sat helpless at a hospital, when he'd watched his teenage son's life ebb away. Bernie bowed his head and tried to bury the memory and the fear he felt for Leo. It was Elsie who had opened the door to the police officers. She'd been fretting alone at home, wondering why Leo hadn't returned from his day at the quarry workshop. A police car was in the driveway, with its lights flashing, and although she dreaded the thought, Elsie hoped Leo was sitting in the back seat, under arrest, but safe. Instead, the police told Elsie about the accident at the quarry. 2 cars were racing each other. One lost control and crashed into the second car. A boy was dead and Leo was in a coma in hospital. Elsie phoned Bernie and he tracked down Rita at a pub. No one spoke while he drove them to the hospital. But Rita had exploded at Bernie after talking to the doctors. "It's all your fault." Yes, Elsie agreed that Bernie should have told her that Leo and the boys were building race cars at their quarry workshop, but it was unfair of Rita to blame him for the accident. However, as usual, her insecure niece needed to lash out, like she did when Bernie saved Leo from drowning while rock fishing. Someone else had to take responsibility for her son's well-being. Elsie felt sickened by her unkind thoughts about Rita, but she knew that as much as she loved her niece, she loved her great-nephew more. Leo was the child a young Elsie dreamed of mothering, but couldn't bear, and now he was lying in a coma in the operating theatre. But it wasn't Bernie's fault, or Rita's. Elsie squeezed her niece's hand. Rita didn't respond to her aunt's comforting touch. She was numb, still trying to process the evening's events. One moment she was at the pub, drinking and laughing with friends. And next, Bernie was driving her and Elsie to the hospital to see Leo. The doctor said something about his brain activity, but between drinks at the pub and the adrenaline shock, Rita couldn't understand what they were saying. She understood the accident was Bernie's fault, however, and Elsie's. They indulged Leo and didn't set boundaries for him. It was also Billy's fault. If he'd stood by Rita, as he'd promised all those years ago, and been a proper father to Leo, this wouldn't have happened. Her life could have been different if she'd stayed in England, and if she'd made a different decision at the clinic. Rita sobbed. For once, ashamed of the thoughts that had plagued her throughout her son's life. She squeezed her aunt's hand and buried her face in Elsie's shoulder. Leo knew nothing of the waiting room drama. He couldn't open his eyes and felt tired, like he had when he'd almost drowned rock fishing with Bernie. Back then, 8-year-old Leo dreamed of a giant squid wrapping its tentacles around his body. Later he learned it was old Bernie, reaching down to rescue him. Now Leo wasn't dreaming, but he recalled snatches of the quarry accident in a dreamlike sequence. He was racing his mate. Leo's car was faster and reached the turnaround point first, and then there was a jolting thud. Leo rolled over and over. It was like being dumped by a wave off the rock fishing beach. When his car stopped rolling, he realised the ground was above him and the sky below. The car was upside down. No one could rescue Leo this time. His car was a write-off, and he guessed his mate's car was too. He'd broken his promises to Auntie Elsie and old Bernie, and he'd have to weather their disappointment and the storm of his mother's anger. But for now, Leo didn't care. He just wanted to sink deeper and deeper into oblivion, like he had when he'd almost drowned, rock fishing. Time passed, or maybe it didn't. Leo couldn't tell. And then he heard a voice, a male voice. It sounded distant. "Come on, son. Don't let go. Come back to us." Perhaps Leo was dreaming. but for a moment he imagined it was his father Billy calling to him. "Come on, son." Hi, I'm Robert Fairhead from Tall and True Short Reads and the Tall and True Writers website. For Season 5 of Tall and True Short Reads, I'm writing and narrating a series of interconnected short stories exploring sliding door moments in the life of my central character, Leo, titled The 9 Lives of Leo Roberts. So far I've released 4 episodes. Prologue, The Clinic. Pregnant teenager Rita waits with her aunt Elsie at a clinic in the converted front room of a terrace house. 1. Rock fishing. A close friend of Elsie's and surrogate uncle to her great-nephew Leo, Bernie, takes the 8-year-old boy rock fishing. 2. A fast car. Part 1. Rita clashes with her 16-year-old son Leo after his great-aunt Elsie quizzes him about the second-hand car he's asked family friend Bernie to tow to an abandoned quarry. 2. A fast car. Part 2. Leo sits in sullen silence in the front seat with Bernie as they tow Leo's car to the quarry workshop. In this Part 3 episode, there is a car accident at the quarry. Leo is in the hospital emergency department, in a coma, and Rita, Elsie and Bernie deal with their thoughts and fears in the waiting room. As the Gotham Writers Workshop explains, interconnected short stories are stories that are complete in that each story can stand alone, but when put together, they interrelate and create a larger whole. Parts 1, 2 and 3 of A Fast Car are more vignettes than standalone stories. However, when put together, I believe 2, A Fast Car is a short story in its own right, but one where the reader can see connections back to the earlier stories. Prologue, The Clinic, and 1, Rock Fishing, and hopefully threads to future sliding door moments in Leo's life. The next chapter in the 9 Lives of Leo Roberts, 3, The House Party, will be released in the new year. Meanwhile, I'm sharing posts on Tall and True about my 5-week road trip with my dog to Uluru that I mentioned in the previous episode. I'll add links to these posts in the show notes. I also hope to release a special festive episode before I head off on another road trip from Sydney to Perth, this time without my dog. It's a short story I wrote for the Furious Fiction Writing Challenge in December 2024. The brief was the story had to be set on Christmas Eve, which makes Nick's Helper the perfect Yuletide episode. In the meantime, please visit the podcast website tallandtrueshortreads.com or check your podcasting app feed for earlier Season 5 episodes and for over 100 episodes from Seasons 1 to 4. You'll find a selection of my short stories, blog posts and other writings at tallandtrue.com. You can also buy my short story and microfiction collections from the Amazon Kindle, Apple Books and Kobo online bookstores. There are links in the show notes. Please follow or subscribe to Tall and True Short Reads and rate and review it on your favourite podcasting app. Doing so helps other listeners enjoy my storytelling. You can support the podcast and my Season 5 stories by making a small one-off or regular donation through the Acast supporter page. Once again, there's a link in the show notes. Finally, please share this episode with family and friends and help spread the word about Tall and True Short Reads and the Tall and True Writers website.